Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia. I do diagnostic assessment, a little bit of advocacy, and a little bit of intervention.
My name is Kim Sharman. I've been working with kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD for the last 15 years, and I am a remediation specialist.
And just came back from a huge literacy conference that you were super excited about.
Yes, in New Orleans.
Many exciting things going on. So what we thought we'd do today is spend a few minutes and actually show you how scores are calculated on the WISC. Okay. Now, the WISC is probably going to be the most commonly one. It's the most common one that people are going to see. It's the most popular IQ test. I personally have some things about it that I don't like because of the kids that I assess, but it's kind of the go-to test. It's relatively quick to administer. You only have to get seven subtests to get a full scale IQ. Most clinicians are super familiar with it. They feel like they could do it in their sleep and so forth and so on. So this is the cover page. Now, Kim, what would your first question be about this cover page as a parent?
What needs to be filled in by the clinician, by the person administering the tests, and what does all this stuff mean?
Okay. So here's the other thing that many parents don't know. You actually have the right to look at this piece of paper. Did you know that?
Well, you can't take it home, but you can sit in a room in the school and look at the raw protocols, which is the data from your testing.
Yes, and there's actually some debate as to whether or not you could take the protocols home. But let's not push too many buttons. Let's just say that you actually go in and you want to look at this protocol. And so a couple of things you should first check for. And the biggest one is right here, your child's name and your child's date of birth. And make sure that you've got the right protocol. I know that sounds super simple and stupid, but I have seen different students' names inside reports, which leads me to believe that sometimes clinicians make mistakes because they have too many people and they're trying to do too much. So anyhow, so that's the first piece. Now, when we start navigating the protocol, this summary area is kind of the most important thing. Now, Kim, you see what it says right here is
row score or block design?
Raw score.
Raw score, sorry.
Okay, so your raw score is where you've totaled up the individual scores on each of the items on the test. Okay, so then as a clinician, I would come in and say, hey, this kid scored a 34 on block design. They scored a 27 on similarities. I'm just randomly making up these numbers. Let's say they got an 18 and so forth. So as we put in these numbers, this is what the clinician would then use to go in and look up on norming tables to find out how this converts. Does that make sense when I'm explaining it to you that way, Kim?
Yeah, so these norming tables, and when you say it converts, what is it going to convert to?
So the raw score converts to initially a scaled score based on your child's date of birth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you happen to look at this protocol and you see that your child's date of birth is wrong, that is a major red flag. Okay, something has gone terribly wrong. And I would encourage you to reach out to a professional outside of the school district, a clinical psych who administers these things, and have them review the protocol for you, but don't necessarily go straight in and call it out to the school district at the get-go, because you want to see the document in its original state to have somebody independently review it. That would be my suggestion to you. Have somebody who is not associated with the school district get a copy of the protocols, The district can send them to that clinician, have them review the protocol to see if things were done correctly. Okay. Because that testing age here tells us what table to go and look up the norms. Do you know what I mean by norms?
So yeah, your scores are going to be all messed up, and what you're comparing the raw data to is going to be incorrect.
Because you've got the wrong age.
That's
Okay?
right.
So when you're young, a shift of a month or two is a big deal. Once you start hitting 12, 13, 14, then you're looking at 6 months. But if somebody didn't get the date of birth right, I would still want somebody go in and look at the protocol. I just would. Okay.
Yep.
Because it's a real basic. Okay. So then I go into this miraculous table and I would say, hey, I'm just going to randomly make up these numbers. And they are likely not going to be correlated to this at all. So I'm not comparing this to any norms. I'm just making up numbers.
Again,
So
this is a special book that the testing administrator has that reevaluates these numbers.
Right. So I go in and I say, hey, you are 12 years, 7 months, and 18 days old. Here's my table. When you get a raw score of 34 on block design, that means you have a scaled score of 12. Now, we've done a little blurb on what are scale scores, standard scores, so bear with us on that. Let's say on similarities, you got a 13. Let's say on matrix reasoning, you got a 7. Again, I managed miraculously just making these numbers up. Coding at a 39 is going to be incredibly low. Vocabulary, we're going to make that a 16 just to make it interesting. Figure weights, we're going to call that also an 8. We're going to give that as low. And then we didn't do visual puzzles. Now, do you notice right here, Kim, that we have a column of numbers that don't have these little parentheses around them?
Yes.
Are you wondering what these little parentheses are for?
I think those are the alternate tests that you can use.
Excellent. You've learned over the years of being around me. So let's say you go in and you do matrix reasoning, and in the middle of doing matrix reasoning, you have a fire drill. And I shouldn't say matrix reasoning. Let's say you have a fire drill in the middle of block design. There is no way you're easily going to be able to recover that score, because if the fire alarm went off right in the middle of a student finishing a puzzle, it's going to throw off the time. So at that point, you have to substitute a different subtest to take the place of that. And so a lot of schools are still giving all 10 subtests of the WISC. And so those scores may be provided, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're calculating the full scale IQ. So these 7 scores here come down, and I'm going to draw a really bizarre line all the way down here. The sum of those is what gives you your full scale IQ.
Okay.
All right. So now, do you notice we have columns here where there are 2 boxes in each column?
Yes.
Okay. We are going to add those 2 numbers up, and we're going to use them. And I'm going to get rid of this very long line here. We're going to use them to calculate the index score. So we have 13 plus 16, which gives us a 29. And it does help if I re-grab my drawing tool. So we've got a 29 there. Okay. Visual spatial. Give me a number for visual puzzles. What number do you kind of want?
Oh, I don't know. 15.
Okay, let's say they did incredibly well on that, and let's call picture span something low. Let's give it a 4, and then we're going to give symbol search a 5, and that'll make more sense.
Is that also something to be wary about? If the subtest that could substitute for it, is that different from the other one?
Yes, each subtest is different and is used for different reasons, and there are particular options. So, for example, letter number sequencing substitutes for digit span or for picture span, but not anything else. Cancellation substitutes for symbol search or for coding, but not anything else.
I assume it's not just a fire drill. that would make you go to a subtest? What are other reasons why they would go to a different subtest, these additional ones?
So I will occasionally make the decision to, in advance of administering the test, say, I do not think that this student will do particularly well on this test for XYZ reason. So I have students with oral language issues, like they have a hard time expressing their ideas, and similarities and vocabulary could be really difficult for them. Information is more of a point on, do you have a piece of factual knowledge or not? It's untimed. You can take as much time to get your answer. Sometimes I will choose to substitute information for one of these other verbal tests for a very, very specific reason. Sometimes I will go in and administer additional subtests because there are some additional enhanced index scores. So, for example, while we have a verbal comprehension, there is also, not to confuse everybody, a comprehensive verbal index score, which combines similarities, vocabulary, information, and comprehension together.
Essentially, you use a lot of times you smell that this test is very hard, this WISC, on kids with dyslexia or extreme, word retrieval issues or whatever. So you are picking these subtests to show what their true intelligence is, so that you can extricate the extreme learning issue.
Yeah, I am always going in and digging hard to try and find what I think is happening and why. Okay.
And they don't really do that in the school district. This is like for outside testing that will put this extra effort towards that.
So you will occasionally run into clinicians who are better trained, who are in the public school system, who know a little more differential diagnosis, but that's not necessarily the norm. Most individuals, most school psychologists have a master's degree. So that means you've done 2 years of post-bachelor's degree work in administration scoring, those kinds of things. You've had clinical supervision, but you haven't necessarily done the deep dive into differential diagnosis the way that somebody who's specialized in neuropsychology would. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep. Yeah, okay. It's a different ball game as far as the level of specificity and
yeah. Okay, so let's go back in. We're gonna add up here. I'm gonna put, that's a bad color. Let me change that color one more time. Let's go something dark. Let's put it in black. So remember, we're gonna add up our 12 and our 13. And I will tell you, I always do running totals in my head just because that's the way that I think. And so let me write down our numbers here. And by the way, if you see this profile where you have a kid scoring in the top 2% of the United States on one subtest and scoring down in the third percentile on another subtest, that is a red flag that something else is going on there. Okay. Which is the difference between the full scale IQ and GAI, which is another one of our videos. Okay, so if we do a little bit of math here, let's see, that's 30, 42, 50. We have 66 is our total. So our full scale IQ would be based on 66. So then we come in down here and we write in our numbers. So our 29 for verbal comprehension goes right there. Our visual spatial is a 27. And they have these little abbreviations here to help people kind of track what's happening in each column. Now, our fluid reasoning is not as strong, so that's at a 15. Our working memory is really a challenge, so that's a 10. And our processing speed is a 9, and our full scale IQ is a 66. So we've looked up, we've converted our raw scores to scale scores. We now we subtotal our scale scores. Okay. We subtotal the 7 for the full scale IQ, that gives us the number down here. And then we've totaled these down here. Now at a 29 On verbal comprehension, you're going to be about a 127.
And that's your indices, that's your book that you went to.
Right. And I'm just ballparking these, and I'm not sure I'm ballparking them particularly well, but I do know that the working memory is probably going to be about a 72, and the processing speed is going to be in the high 60s, low 70s.
And again, the book that you're looking at, the reason why birthday and testing age is so important is that you're looking at a different column in this book based on that information in the upper right-hand corner.
Right, that data changes by age. So what you're expected to do as you get older is significant, and your scores are supposed to continue to go up. Okay. So that's how they create these index scores for the various subtests. Now, the other thing that should be happening that is frequently not happening is the clinician is supposed to come in and say, does this make sense when we think about this kid? So you have these wonderful profiles over here, which I never use because I look at the numbers and I think in numbers. Okay. But let's go in for a minute and let's mark. So we've got our 12 for similarities, and we've got our 16 for vocabulary. And so you'll notice I'm putting in these little dots. Now, have you ever seen these before, Kim? Have you seen this? Okay. So then they would connect those dots and they would say, block design is a 12. So let me put a dot there. And visual puzzles is a 15. And so I'm going to put a dot there. For fluid reasoning, we've got a 7. For matrix reasoning, and sorry, I'm not writing beautifully given the size, and I'm doing it with a finger on a trackpad. Let me see if I can clean that up just a tad bit. So we have visual puzzles was a 15, and I really should just type them in. Matrix reasoning was a 7. Figure weights is an 8. Digit span is a 6. Picture span is a 4. Coding is a 4, and symbol search is a 5. Okay, so you'll notice now that I'm drawing lines between these various subtest scores. Now, smack here at 10 is average. Okay, but when we go in and we start graphing this, anybody who has done any significant work in the field, who's done anything on any level of differential diagnosis, would look at that and say, that's a wacky profile.
Do most clinicians at school do this? Do they do this little dot thing chart?
Some do, some don't.
Because this is a very good representation for a parent to see something is off with this scoring or this testing.
Something wacky. So it doesn't have to be that there's something wrong with the testing.
That's true.
It can be telling you, hey, your kid has something going on in working memory and processing speed. There is something getting in their way of holding information and working quickly.
And you as a parent need to understand that
information. What was that?
Right. You as a parent need to understand what that means.
Yeah.
He's really skilled in this area, but not in this. There's something going on here.
Now, similarly, and again, we just made these numbers up, so don't anybody go look up the tables and tell me that I've done these wrongs, because, again, I am just randomly making up these numbers. But we're going to look at how the index scores also change as we plug them in over here. And then hopefully I haven't overguessed the full scale IQ here. So we've got a 127. We've got a 124, we've got an 87 that I've just randomly made up, we've got a 72, we've got a 69, and then we've got a 106, which...
Okay, and these composite scores, the difference between the subtest is that's within the student himself, but this is compared to the rest of everybody else his age. Is that right?
So the index scores or the subtest scores are how your student did relative to other students of that age. Okay.
Yes.
When
Okay,
you
got it.
see this profile of scores jumping all over the place like this tells me there is something clearly getting in the way of this student's learning, and there's something weird going on. And that's not weird judgmental. That's like, this kid does not think and work in the way that a typical profiled student would. So don't think that it's wrong. It means, hey, this kid has got some amazing verbal skills and visual spatial skills, but then we have something happening here that's really driving down the numbers. And just doing that simple graph and thinking about the numbers this way can be super powerful and insightful, so that you can go in and ask more precise questions and hopefully get more valuable information about what your kid needs and why.
That really is important, to turn those numbers into a picture, a drawing, a graph representation.
For parents that don't know how the scores work, yes, it paints a picture that you can begin to see.
Right.
For myself as a clinician, I've done this so many
Yeah.
times, I can do it in my sleep. It's like, yeah, duh, there's something weird going on here.
Yeah, you know it automatically.
Yeah. But all right. Please leave
Okay.
comments if you'd like us to do another video on something else. Let us know. Thanks.
Thank you.